And welcome back. Continuing to work on the right wing. In this video I'll be working on the service bulletin for the Aileron inboard bracket. As I'll discuss, there are some issues that were found with a few aircraft, and to alleviate that issue, for those aircraft that are flying and are already completed, then it has you do some inspections and then do some things based on what you find. And then for those who have not, who are still building, they provided you the service bulletin parts to implement that service bulletin as you're building, which obviously makes sense. So just going through and inventorying all the pieces and then getting them all prepared, deburred, getting rid of the edges on the sharp edges and such. And then going through, looking at all the pieces, the bracket itself is a lot thicker than the original pieces, and so there's some things that you have to take into consideration, and again, those are some things I'm going to go over. But the whole process itself is not too difficult, and it's a pretty stout piece when everything's said and done.
Alright, so you just watched me assemble the, this is the SB Service Bulletin inboard Aileron bracket, and the difference between these is that this is essentially what the original bracket looks like, where the one piece is a curved flange as part of the whole piece itself. Apparently this has caused some cracking in a couple of aircraft, and those that don't have signs of cracking but are flying airplanes, they're just having them do an annual inspection. Until they do see a crack, then you have to address it and fix it. Well, since I'm still in the process of building, then I can go ahead and implement this, and I'll never have to worry about doing the annual inspection. So what it is two thick pieces, and then they use 1/8" angle aluminum on either side of that instead of the rounded flange as one piece. And then on the back there'll be a doubler and some more backing on the back side of the spar to where you mount this. Now, one of the issues that I've seen multiple builders discuss is that the plans actually call out for 470 rivets, the dome head rivets, to go on all of these except for these three locations. These it calls to have flush mounted 426 rivets. But a lot of builders and a lot of people who have flying aircraft that have implemented this change have noticed that the aileron itself rubs on the heads of the rivets. So what they've recommended to do is actually use 426-11 rivets in place of the 470s. So that's what I'm actually going to try to do, is countersink all five of these holes and just use 426-11 rivets in place of the domed 470s. So hopefully that'll allow the aileron to travel just fine, and I won't have any rubbing. Some have talked about they've had to use washers to offset the aileron out a little bit just to get the clearance, and then also they've talked about shaving the heads a little bit on the 470 rivets. So hopefully this will allow me to avoid most of that, if not all of that, by just go ahead and countersink and use 426 rivets altogether.
Alright, and with that, I had gone on to talk about some of the steps in the service bulletin, but I ended up just rambling on and on and on. So, suffice it to say, the instructions are actually fairly straightforward. They start out as if you have a flying machine and you're doing the inspection, and it points out what to look for, how to address any issues that you might find, and basically just talks about don't really do anything unless you see cracks during your annual inspections. And if you see cracks, then this is how you address those and how you fix it, and basically how you replace the bracket. Other than that, it has you go into the last half of it is building this bracket, and I believe on page 8 is where it starts, and it points out to only follow the steps that are applicable to your particular model, and each step has a list of the models that step is applicable for. So you go through, I've primed everything, and now I'm starting to assemble all of the parts. The bearing that is used is if you've already built this bracket, that it's going to tell you to harvest that, bearing and reuse it in the new bracket that you're making here. Otherwise, you can order a new bearing from Vans, and I believe it's somewhere around 10 or 15 bucks for the bearing. But if you can, just obviously get the old bearing out of the bracket that you may have already put together. But the bearing sits between the two thick bracket plates, and then from there you attach the angle aluminum pieces at the base of the bracket and rivet all of that together. Now again, the bracket, the angle aluminum, where I discussed I'm going to be flush mounting the 426 rivets. It's too narrow for the cage of a countersink tool, obviously. So what I ended up using was my deburring tool. Now you obviously want to be very careful using that because it's very easy to drill too deep and countersink too deep without a cage. So as you're doing it, just take out a little bit of material at a time and then test it with your rivets to make sure you don't go too deep.
Alright, so this is the finished product. As I talked about, these are the three that are called out to be flush mounted 426s towards the bearing connection point. These are called out in the safety or the bulletin instructions. But these are the 426s that are put in place of the 470s. That way the aileron, when it moves, should have a little more clearance here because this is thicker metal than what was originally designed, which made this closer to the aileron and close that gap. So hopefully that'll alleviate any problems. Like I said, I may still have to use some washers to offset the aileron just a little bit, but everything I've read says that this should fix the problem. Just be careful when you're countersinking these. I ended up using my deburring tool, and you just got to be careful you don't go too far. But they seem to be okay, and everything was able to get most of it with a squeezer. But as you saw, I ended up having to use the bucking bar in several locations, just because the squeezer just couldn't get the size rivet to squeeze. So anyway, we'll continue on.
And so with that, I'm going to go ahead and let this video run out here. Again, for those who continue to watch these videos, I appreciate it. If you get a chance, hit that like button. If you haven't already, go ahead and subscribe and hit that alarm bell, and you'll get notifications anytime I release a new video. And for those who may have just stumbled onto this video for the first time, I'm in the process of building an RV14. It's a whole lot easier than you think it may be. If you have any inclination or you're curious at all, by all means, It's a whole lot easier than think, and it's a lot of fun. With that, we'll see you guys next time around.